So I don't know what to call this. It's like the Wolf and the Bear after dark,
I guess that would work.
right? I was like, that's kind of cool, but basically, this is kind of the new thing that we're gonna do, where whether it's with Terry, our co-host, our counterpart, or whether it's something that she does with us or not, but something where we just kind of kick back and talk about all the wild stuff that makes us sound even crazier than the normal podcast already does. But I'm a huge nerd. I love topics of paranormal. And I was like, I feel like it's just time for me to celebrate that part of myself too. And to not like force Terry to have to be a part of that with me. You know what I mean? I feel like I would just watch her slowly die as I had tried to talk about cryptids, She'd be like, I could be doing 8 readings right now. So, and like stuff like that I love, and it makes me really curious, and so I know that's stuff that you have a lot of knowledge about.
Mhm.
So for the audience that doesn't know, this is Steven. This is
Hey,
my brother from
everyone.
another mother. This is Terry's son. And I don't know if you ever saw this, but in one of the episodes, I can't remember what it was, but she said the nicest thing about you I've ever heard.
Gosh.
And if I ever was annoyed with you at any point in life, I'm like, damn, this erases it all. But she was like, before she goes, we were talking about life, right? And she was saying, before she had you, she had zero conviction that she had ever experienced love before. And then she was like, and then I knew I am not so broken I can't do this because I felt it. I was like, dang it, that's really nice. But anyways, so yeah, it's so nice to have you. And we're gonna jump right in because we were texting earlier and I was quizzing you. Okay, so I'm just gonna jump right in because this is the biggest thing that's sort of been bothering me / in my head. So we always talk about good and bad, right? And we talk about walking in the light or the dark. And for me, that has meaning only from the perspective of I'm trying to do it in the light. And I'm not even sure, you and we've talked about whether true soul evolution really means walking all the way in the light or whether it means experiencing all of it, the full balance, right? And you are a belief that it needs to be all of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no. And so and to you, like, what does that mean? Because I know what you're saying. So I don't think this is like solipsism or anything. I think it's like you believe that it would be just as dutiful or like purposeful, honorable, whatever, to basically quote unquote devolve or like go into the dark, right? As much as it would be to be saintly.
Yes, so I kind of have a little bit of an issue with the idea of being completely saintly because everyone makes mistakes at some point in their life.
Yeah.
And I think that you need to know about your darker side to be able to truly understand yourself. And that's also how you limit yourself from doing bad things, essentially. Also, humans aren't really meant to be like divine creatures or anything like that. They're meant to be living, breathing entities that make mistakes, that go throughout their lives and learn lessons. If you're always on the idea that you're doing everything for the light, everything good, everything's great, then you are essentially making it so that you're putting yourself on a pedestal and making yourself a little bit infallible to any mistake that you made. And it just rubs me the wrong way when people are so obsessed with what they believe is love and light that they ignore the damaging parts of it. I mean, you can't always be kind to everyone, and in a lot of cases, being nice, loving, and lightful damages you as well. So you have to find the happy
Dang.
medium of when you're not going to be, the best that you could be.
Dude, you have no idea. I think I told you when I was at the house, or I think we were talking about it, but I had this weird breakup that happened. And I kind of was shut down a little bit after. And I was like, why do I always spend so much time like having a pleasant look on my face or like all my interactions? I try to manage and make sure they're, if I'm being really, really, quote unquote nice, it'd be like so that everyone's like comfortable. But if I'm like being honest, maybe it's more manipulative where I'm like, oh, I can manage everything so it feels safe. But I noticed as soon as I kind of gave that up and I was like, I'm just going to be a bitch if I feel like it, or I'm just going to like do what I want and let my energy be out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed it's like people, it's more helpful to me. I'm less drained, even though being nice is what would be draining, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or must be the truth because that's what I've been doing less of. How
Well,
curious, right?
I don't think it's so much of being nice is necessarily the issue. I think the issue is oftentimes kindness and niceness actually comes from the darker part of yourself anyway.
Dang
I
it, dude.
Yeah, it's
You can't just drop these bombs. That's you literally you said that the actions and stuff of being nice
mhm.
have a tendency to be coming from the darker side of us,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is very true.
A large portion of the darker side, what people would say in magic, for example, left leaning, is what benefits yourself, while right leaning or the light would be
Dang
benefiting others.
it.
And if you're always nice and it's not helping anyone, then all you're doing is helping yourself.
Dang it. Cuz all you're just I hate this already. I hate this conversation already. Dang. Oh my gosh, I mean, yeah, like there's nothing but truth there. It's just not something I've ever thought of it in that way.
Mhm.
Because well, like the joke about the East Coast, West Coast, right? And so they say like on the East Coast, if you break down your car,
Mhm.
someone will come by and they'll be like, "You dumb piece of like why can't you?" But they'll stop and they'll fix it with you.
Yep.
And then on the West Coast, they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, I felt so bad. As I was getting here on time, I saw somebody broke down.
Yep.
I just hope they're okay." Thoughts and you're like, "Oh well, that's not helpful at all." Like,
Yeah. Pity is just self-serving. When you pity other people,
dang.
all you're doing is putting yourself in a higher position than them rather than actually solving their issues.
Wow. Okay. So I guess we'll jump right in. I don't know how my ADD dude. Um so the thing that made me start thinking about the good and bad and like how powerful both is and like how much of this is at play at all times.
Mhm.
And so I was reading this book about sort of the dissociative identity disorder and
Mhm.
basically how it's kind of this really, really old ancient process where there was this ancient knowingness that we were able to house like and cut off and compartmentalize our
Yeah.
psychology. But to do so would be ultimately traumatic and you'd have to break the psyche over and over and
Yep.
over again. And the younger, the better, because that's, I
Yep.
guess, what they said, you'd get cleaner breaks. So wild, right? And
Mhm.
then there are books about the Black Awakening. Are you familiar with that?
Remind me a little bit on that one.
It's like this concept where across America, across any place though,
Mhm.
it's like where there are all these split personality cells,
Gotcha. Yep.
and that at the right time they'll just go for the infrastructure, and then they won't remember that they did it. And so there's that, and then the religious component. So that makes sense. Like the
Mhm.
math on that checks out. It's like, okay, severely abuse these people, make yourself this like perfect thing where one could be a sex slave, one could be a drug lord, one could be a murderer, right?
Mhm.
And that seems to be the trend. It seems to be that like they
Yeah.
had the younger you could assassinate better, all these things.
Yeah, and honestly, I think a large portion of that is because we're not seeing very many people who are below the age of 40 in power whatsoever. So you create a situation where a lot of people who are younger don't necessarily think that their actions have any impact on anything.
Hmm.
And it allows them to kind of almost push away what they've done that's negative and just say, oh,
Mm,
well, I don't have the power to change anything. So clearly, what I just did, killing this guy or, selling drugs, doesn't really impact anyone at all.
mm.
And we've also kind of gotten into this cult of mind your own business, which, yes, that's okay in some cases. But what it really has done is it's bolstered people's almost self-importance in a way that allows them to do things that harm people around them and just say, well, it's my business, that's not their.
There's no community. Dang. But so, well, so I guess here's what I guess I have. I'm going to tell you a scenario, and then I'm curious whether you feel that there's, because you're very intuitive, whether you feel there's accuracy or this person is full shit. But
Mhm.
and furthermore, even if this person is not being honest, I believe the scenario is true.
Mhm.
But essentially, I was watching this podcast where this guy talks about that he's part of this bloodline where there's a lot of wealth and power, and that they basically dug up these old tomes out of the Ohio snake mounds, and they started calling on these energies. And so their bloodline, through that discovery, that archaeological discovery, started commanding power. But there were two branches of it. One's much more public, and then one is where he's from. So his, apparently, I guess his bloodline's side motto was like black and gold. They were the ones that were doing like the dirty work and the like ugly stuff. Why does that make sense to you? You started nodding when it said black and gold. What does that mean? And this is why I love you.
It's difficult to fully explain, but
okay,
it is kind of like they're viewing themselves as the light in the darkness in a way.
Okay.
They're thinking that every action that they're doing that's negative is positively impacting something. It's kind of a narcissistic way to describe yourself in a way. But when you get onto the grimoires, I'm kind of hesitant to fully believe his story because as someone who has read many grimoires, they are pretty intensely. If it's not something that you just dig it up out of a river or out of any kind of archaeological find and suddenly know how to read it. That takes years. Every grimoire is coded in a different way, and it is kind of simple for some people to pick up, the more public grimoires like Le Petit Albert or even the Sacred Art of Bremlin the Mage. Try to do it and think, oh, well, now I'm a mage. Now I know how to decode these. But these things already have been decoded by other people who are plenty smarter than whoever is trying to do it at the moment. And it's just very difficult.
But they want to be read. Like,
yeah, well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
they do.
They're going to find a way to get, they'll be like, there's got to be some energy that's like, oh, they found it. Let me go teach them how to use this.
They
right?
do, but they also don't. It is a very slippery slope with most grimoires, because not all grimoires are evil, for one. Grimoires are just books of magic, and in the past, they were even books of just basic day-to-day rituals that people would follow. In a lot of cases, grimoires are kind of like a secret diary. So yeah, there's always this little bit of darkness in the background of, well, what if I reveal all the truths, all of this, all the information about them? But it's not going to be something that's like, here's how you solve this. You still have to put in a lot of work. And with magic,
maybe that's just the story that they tell. Like maybe,
absolutely.
Right? Like maybe that goes way back. Like, but it seems to be true that they believe that they cut a deal with a principality that gives them, through their bloodline, governing right. And so apparently this guy's mom had been spending a ton of money trying to prove certain lineages that would give them more power as a family. And so she was very, very invested in, because apparently that would have been honored in their satanic circles of whatever they were doing, right? And that it would have been different than the public facing Reynolds family. And that these guys were the ones that were basically like, in order to still have relevancy, I guess his father had to basically go out west. So he basically had to go to Arizona, to the desert. And then that's where they split him, his sisters, and basically his maternal grandfather was actually a splitter for a lot of families. So,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
There is a bit of an intense irony there with the bloodline thing, though, because based on what I know of the darker side, the satanic worship, things like that, it is very self-empowering rather than family empowering. And
they break their families.
Yes, absolutely. And
which is crazy.
The intent behind it, well, I'm making the best that I can be in this life. No matter what gets in my way, I can basically destroy it. And saying that their family lineage has some kind of connection to some principality, some demonic whatever, almost feels more like a narcissistic coping method than it feels like it's the exact truth. Now, if they do have this information passed down, then yes, technically speaking, someone could use the information that was handed down to them and then use that to benefit them. But it's very, very human to believe that just because you're blood related to someone that it means anything.
Well, and they're it's so human too because they obsess over it for this like genetic capability
Hmm.
allegedly that it provides where you're more able to host, right, certain
Yeah.
things. So I guess there's probably value to that if that's true.
Hmm.
But and I could see that maybe it would be or could be, but like it's still you're right. So the belief system's very, very flawed. But
Hmm.
then, he talks about how through the process of that, and because there was such a darkness to what they were doing, is that essentially he saw like I guess the morphing capabilities that some of that stuff allows, and that it's very real, that it's more
Hmm.
real than we'd want to know or want to acknowledge, right? And that he was basically saying, you basically had like a weird shape shifting, physically shape shifting path, or you could
Hmm.
go the more blood related path. And he was just basically saying like that was known, like that was
Yeah.
understood to be true. And I believe that he believes that he saw these things,
Yes.
and intuitively I feel that he did. So intuitively, I've not
Hmm.
once felt that he's been particularly dishonest. I've watched a lot of his stuff by now, but you know,
I agree that he most likely did see these things, and I agree that he is being as honest as he can be.
yeah,
The difficulty there is a lot of people that are in that side of things lie without knowing they're lying.
correct, right.
And in a situation like that, it is very difficult for us to really discern what is true other than just what we're feeling.
Hmm.
And yes, all of those things do go on behind the scenes. There are plenty of ridiculously dark things that happen. But sometimes, in my opinion, the people who come out and talk about it and say that they're part of it are doing it to make themselves look better in their own minds, not to society. And they're trying to make themselves out to almost be like this big bad villain. I mean, it kind of stems back to the whole idea of once we started publicizing school shootings, they blew up. It
Fair, fair.
People
Well,
always want notoriety. They always want people to know them, even if it's not for good things.
so his big thing is he went very, very Christian.
Okay.
So he approaches it from the perspective of like, I'm trying my best. I've seen hell. I've seen what they're capable of. He basically is why I admire him, I guess maybe, is that he is a Christian with all those leanings and like true like die hard. I mean, like, wow, he really
Gotcha.
is, right?
Hmm.
But he's also willing to admit cryptids exist. He's willing to admit this shape. He's like, yes,
Hmm.
and also they're really good at what they do when he's talking
Yeah.
about the dark. And he's like, so, and he kind of reads more into the violent components of the Bible and scripture. And he's like, I wish people would focus on that more and be like, hey, we've got to fight. There's a spiritual war. So he's almost like a very committed zealot, and he's kind of
Hmm.
trying to bring forth. That's what's interesting. And there seems to be, there's one guy who won't show his face, and then one
Hmm.
girl who will, but she's not claiming any blood rights. So she's not using any real names, and he's using his family. And he's like released photos of his abuse at a childhood age.
Hmm.
So they're like kind of, I don't know. I think he
Hmm.
said some really wild stuff about this guy who was directly Obama's selection for this role in the UN.
Hmm.
And he was like, I didn't even know he was active. He was like, when I was in the military, he was just this guy. And he was like, the things that happened to me and my family after I said that were horrendous. And so he was like, I didn't even know. So I don't know. There
Hmm.
just seems to be some things where I'm like, maybe he's being honest. But this girl, she was talking about some really wild stuff that she had to see and like all
Hmm.
that. So maybe if they're full of it, damn, I'm
Well, I'm
convinced.
not
But
saying they're necessarily full of it. What I'm saying is, and it might actually be worse than what they're describing. What I'm saying is
yeah.
when you step away from one of those situations, you do also have a tendency to rationalize things in your mind and also exaggerate things in your mind at the same point.
Hmm.
I'm not saying any of this didn't happen, but
Hmm.
human memory is more or less broken to an extent.
More or less
It's,
very manipulable.
yeah, I mean, we
Do you
manipulate
think there's
ourselves all
like,
the time.
yeah, oof, our clients. Do you think there's any credence at all to the like volume of people that allegedly are out there that are like this? Because there's a lot of Satanists. You know that. We know that.
Yeah, there are.
It's very popular,
So
unfortunately.
I'd say probably about 30% of them are doing it because they're edgy. I'd say there's probably only about 10% that are actually legitimately practicing things and actually getting things done.
Yeah, like the old power, old
Yeah.
stuff.
It's so easy to pick up some grimoire from somewhere. Like, I mean, you can buy the freaking Necronomicon online and just follow its paces on that one grimoire and then think, oh, I'm a practicing Satanist, I'm a practicing magician. And that's just not how it works.
What do you think that brings into your house? Like if you're if you're really unpracticed and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna go be edgy, and then you bring something like that in your home, don't you think that's a problem?
Oh, it's absolutely a problem.
Like it's a
But
huge problem, right? Okay.
it is.
It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it is. And oftentimes when you bring that kind of thing into your home, you're also reinforcing yourself because that thing is going to push you to continue doing things. That thing is going to convince you that, oh, you're this powerful, you're doing this, you're doing whatever. It's just a never ending cycle. Once you get your
Yeah.
first one done, if you do it wrong, well, now you've got that thing attached to you forever, and it's going to continuously convince you to do the wrong thing, basically.
Oh, I can't wait to ask you. Keep going, but I have something I want to ask you about.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Well, it's about what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so oh my God, I'm so curious what you think about this. All right, so there's this person who's basically alleging that
Mm-hmm.
he describes it like a membrane, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it basically says that when you fall asleep, there's the astral, like dream state, and then there's lucid, which is like almost one step closer to this other thing. And then that there is also something else that basically we could access accidentally or through sleep or on purpose, perhaps. That is essentially the way he describes it. He said it would be like if the Twilight Zone and the Addams family had a baby. And he said that it was a realm. And he said that ever since he was a kid, he would be like shown these places, but that if they would respond to him like we would a ghost.
Yeah.
And he said that he only ever had one response, but he said that everything would be normal except that at a grocery store, there would be like Cheetos, a bag of fingers, and something. He said it was just off. It was always weird, and everything was just off a little bit and weird a little bit. And what do you think that is?
So there's 3 different possibilities for that. I'm going to start out with the most skeptical one, just because that's the easiest.
Okay.
He could be lucid dreaming. And
just
honestly,
further.
he could just be experiencing things that his mind has created that subconsciously he doesn't necessarily.
I forgot to explain something else, though. This might help too. This will influence what you think. You need to know this, I guess. He said that he would have these at young ages, and then 10 to 15 to 20 years later, the places that he would see would be revealed to him. But he said that it was mirrored, and the way he described it was, if in this realm, your old house was like one unit, one building. He said in that other realm, depending on when you were there and when you got dropped in, he said it might be there. It might be an empty lot. It might be the same exact building, but with its separate unit as well. So there were like little things that would just be close, very mirrored, but off a little bit. And he never saw a doppelganger, but he saw his old home. But what was weird was it was on stilts and it was in a different kind of lot zone. There were 2 places he could have gone, and he went to his old home and then went inside. But long story short, so yeah, I'm just curious, like.
So I still have those 3 possibilities in my mind. I'm not necessarily saying I'm leaning more towards the lucid dreaming thing. That's just a possibility.
Yeah,
That's
very much so.
In the back of my mind, he very well could just be creating those kind of things in his mind, and at some point the memory kind of shifts a little bit in his head and it causes him to think he's had deja vu. But the other 2 options are he could be dimension hopping, which is a thing that some people do experience when they sleep. It is basically where someone is so removed from their spiritual body that they're brought somewhere else. Now,
is that good or bad? Removed from your spiritual body? What does that mean?
It basically is just a further version of lucid dreaming or astral traveling.
Oh, but it's not like an abandonment. It's not
No,
like
it's
you're
not
so
an
shut
abandonment. No,
down.
absolutely
Okay,
not.
okay, okay. I misunderstood. I thought that it meant bad things. Okay, got it, got it, got it.
It would be significantly harder to wake someone up if they were in that
Okay,
frame, but
okay,
it's not something that's like, well, I'm done with my body now.
okay, got it, got it.
It's more like exploring different realms.
Mm.
The final one that is a little bit more towards what I'm probably thinking on this is people do have an ability to kind of create their own world and drag things into it, and other things that are outside of it may be interested, may come in. It's kind of a mixture between lucid dreaming and astral. It's where you're in astral form, but you've created this entire, basically, place that's just for you. And if you leave that open, things from the outside can influence it, change it. You might get really, really weird things like the fingers, for example. But it is also a way that a lot of people will meditate as well. There are different belief systems that when you're meditating, if you put yourself in one of those self-created dimensions, quote unquote, it will help you get closer to divinity. Now,
Well, I definitely do that.
Mhm.
Like, I've got a spot that I built
Mhm.
that's like mine.
Mhm. It's
So I
more
know what
like,
you
yeah,
mean because you always go back to the same spot. Like,
yeah.
I know it. Yeah, but
It's
that's a
kind
weird
of
way to
like
think about that. It's a
creating
dimension.
your own thought form in a way,
Yeah,
but it be an entire dimension. Um,
I agree.
I'm Again, it's very difficult for me in those kind of situations to fully get a good grasp on exactly what he's experiencing without
More
talking
than
to him.
anything, I was just curious if the dimension hopping thing was like legit and the way he described. So I'm curious about this. He said that in his time of all of this, because he just basically seems to have just been weirdly gifted with this dream thing, right? Because
Hmm.
he was doing it from a very young age. And this goes into. So, okay, I'm getting excited. Okay, I got to slow down. So basically, he would talk about these doors, and he
Hmm.
said sometimes he would see them when he was lucid dreaming, sometimes he would see them in this other realm, and
Hmm.
sometimes but more often than not, it was lucid or in that other realm. And he said you could just tell they was one or the
Yeah.
other.
Hmm.
And he said basically that the way he said I have no idea why I feel it's this way, but he said you could shake on the door, and sometimes it would be dark, or sometimes it would be light coming through. But
Hmm.
he said, but I just knew, and the way he described it was like a piece of like several slices of Swiss cheese that just had to align
Hmm.
correctly, which would kind of go into the alien stuff that they talk
Yeah.
about the stargates and how they need to be aligned. But and so he never was able to enter the doors because they
Hmm.
were always closed. But that he just had a knowingness that there was something,
Yeah.
there was a way that this could pass through to something else.
Well, absolutely. I think those doors will probably open for him at some point. I think he's just not ready for it yet. And I think one of the
You
things,
think it's more personal?
I think it's kind of personal. I'd say spiritual, rather. He's not connected
Mm,
enough with things.
mm.
The problem is with those kind of things is when you are describing your experiences publicly,
Mm,
a lot of the times some of the energies will step back because it might
mm.
be something just for him.
No, well, he didn't like it.
Well,
He
yeah.
wanted it gone.
I mean,
I
the
mean, he
thing
would have
is
wanted.
though, is there are plenty of things in this world that are for us, that better us, that are not necessarily something we want
Mm-hmm,
or like. I don't necessarily think it's anything dark, is where I'm
mm-hmm.
coming from. I think it's just an aspect of his own personal ability that he is uncomfortable with. And telling it to everyone, too, also kind of being uncomfortable and spreading it around will make it a lot harder for him to fully step into what it is.
Well, I definitely think so. He, in conjunction with all of this stuff, he had a very, very, very like abusive relationship with
Hmm.
Lilith.
Hmm.
And so he basically felt more often than not. So he felt very victimized by a lot of these dreams. Like he
Hmm.
felt very experienced with these things like soul traps. He was
Yeah.
like, I would spend nights and nights and nights being tortured because I looked at the wrong thing for too long. Like in these dreams, he's like this. So I think he was kind of very over it, and probably for
Gotcha.
good reason. He was very, very victimized. Like, that's honestly, listening to a lot of these people, they are like broken humans by this. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely. But
it's
I will add,
horrible.
if it was things he wasn't meant to see and a demonic was the thing that decided what he was meant to and what he was not meant to see, most likely those things were things that would benefit him and the demonic just didn't want. With demonics, if you have any kind of power over yourself, you're also developing a certain level of power over them.
Mhm.
And if you are bettering yourself, it's going to make them angry if they're trying to come after you.
Yeah.
So I think that those things are related, but I don't think that that specific demonic was causing those things. I think it was trying to prevent those things from getting better.
Right. Oh, I agree. Well, his allegation sort of seems to be that he had this really vivid dream when he was very young, like 7, 6
Mm-hmm.
or 7, which is way too young to be approached by all this stuff, but it
Mm-hmm.
seems to be happening. And he opened up this door. He was coaxed to open up this door. And in the dream at like that age, he said he felt like a bunch of energy rush in and through his body. And he said, and then after that, that's when all the dream, he said, from then on, I always had vivid dreams and I could do that weird shit.
Yeah, that is kind of difficult though, just because I kind of feel like there's two different forms of puberty. There's one that is physical and then there's one that's spiritual.
I
And
agree.
the
Yep.
spiritual begins way earlier and has a
Really?
definite event happen that causes it. I mean, you hear all the time about children who are experiencing things that adults can't see, don't see, or
Yeah. Yeah.
won't
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that when that spiritual puberty starts, everything kind of ramps up. I mean, you know how when you're going through physical puberty, you get a little bit more angry more often, you're
Mm-hmm.
pushier, you're meaner. It's similar to that, but with, spiritual abilities.
Well, so is that why so whenever Terry says that traveler energy like prefers estrogen in that sort of that process,
Mhm.
is that more of a physical thing, like, or is that more of like it's the spiritual thing that they're there for?
It's difficult for me to fully answer this without being a little bit divisive. In my opinion, one of the reasons why it prefers estrogen is because most of them feel that it's easier to mess with female energies in general.
Hmm.
And a
More
lot of that,
emotional.
well, absolutely. That and male energies typically don't come into psychic powers, spiritual abilities, things like
Yeah.
that, at least as readily as women do.
Yeah.
So it's easier for them to attach to estrogen because the people who are around them are not necessarily believing them.
Yeah. Wow. So they're like, oh my God, I'm so mad right now. I'm not acting like myself. And you're like, yeah, well, duh, you're
Yeah.
13.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Yeah. Dang.
Yeah. Traveler energy is kind of annoying in general, though, with that kind of thing. I've also noticed traveler energy tends to be the thing that will attach to children more often than
Hmm.
not, regardless of gender. And I think that some of that does stem to the fact that in the womb, technically, we all start out as female and then we slowly develop into whatever we're going to
Hmm.
be it staying female, be it becoming male. It's difficult, but it also points to the whole no one ever believes kids when they're experiencing things either because overactive imagination, oh, that didn't happen. It's easier to pick on those who would be thought of as overreacting or imagining
Hmm.
things than it is to pick on people who would be
Like a
believed
psych
in
ward.
society. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm not saying that women are a psych ward, just that.
No, I mean, of course, but we recognize that these energies, their only dominion is really our emotions,
Mhm.
our perception.
Yes.
And so, their weapon of choice would have to be emotions and mental stability.
Mhm.
And you've got women who work on a cycle and they have a weakness within that cycle every month.
Yep.
You're going to figure out a way to harness that or try.
Well,
Mm.
even on top of that, I mean, when women reacted to things in the past, it was viewed as hysteria.
Hmm.
It has been a situation where you've made an entire group kind of less likely to be believed. So why would you, if you don't want other people to know that you're there and you don't want people to step in to get rid of you, why would you go after the people that traditionally everyone believes what they say? You
Hmm.
would immediately go towards the person who is considered to be emotional or considered to be overly imaginative. I mean, I guarantee you that if the shoe was on the other foot, men would be experiencing way more activity than women would. But it isn't.
Really?
Yes.
Do you think that guys will have experiences and just never remember them because they chalk them up to not being real and cast them out?
I
Or do
think
you think they
that
just don't have experiences?
the issue is with men when they have experiences is men typically are problem solvers by nature. What comes
Oh,
into
they'll get to the bottom of it.
yeah, they'll try to get to the bottom of it, and they will decide that it was caused by something else. And then if
Mm,
they talk about it, they'll be like, "Oh, well, my water heater was causing my
mm,
wall to shake," instead of, "Oh, something was banging on the wall." It's really, really easy to create a situation where you have proved to yourself that something is not paranormal when it actually is. And
mm,
that actually is something that I run into on investigations all the time. You
yeah.
do need to kind of debunk things, but you should be debunking them from a completely unemotional standpoint, not from, oh, I hope it's this. And a lot of guys don't want to believe in paranormal things.
No. And can't blame them. Gosh. But oh man, did you watched Haunting of Hill House, right? The way that they did that was so cool because like whenever that unique little storm happened or when the mold just randomly happened out of one night, you know. And so as an audience, you're sitting there thinking it could be a storm.
Yeah.
But then also you're like, ooh, there's enough weird. But
Yep.
but then you can't make it right that the mold happened overnight, you know.
Absolutely
So
not.
it would become progressively more. And so think about how we are as humans. It's like I
Hmm.
would rather just make up anything
Yep.
else than to think something like that was occurring.
Yeah,
Truthfully.
absolutely. And it's also a situation where certain types of people are less likely to ask for help. So they want to rationalize it
Mm,
as being something that they can handle on their own. And I just don't think that with the way our world is currently working, that very many people can deal with paranormal things on their own.
mm, hmm. What do you think with I'm a little bit worried. Actually, I'm a lot bit worried, dude. I talk about this all the time, but in a more veiled way, I think.
Hmm.
The witchcraft stuff, dude. It's like everyone doesn't know what they're doing, but they're doing all the stuff that opens up doors in their life. And you're like, you don't even know. There's somebody I just found out recently is, dude, I don't even know if I want to talk about this. They're basically in an environment where they can coach people
Hmm.
to do this group meditation. And then they're basically like, oh, by the way, there might be these three entities, but they're there to help you. They're really misunderstood. Dude. And it's, my blood
Yeah.
boils. But that's why we do this. I kept thinking
Hmm.
like, this is all I can do is this podcast and hopefully the right people find it. But like, dang, this is real. People are out there sharing this information to other people. And
Yep.
like, it's so scary to me. It's not okay. And but you can't do anything.
Big problem with witchcraft is people get in these small little groups that will reinforce everything that they're doing. And there is plenty of witchcraft that is not negative. There's plenty of things that are perfectly okay. I mean, that's why right hand path is a thing in magic. But people don't get into it because they want to be altruistic. They get into it because they see something that they want in their life and they are actively trying to better themselves. And that almost always leads to bad results. I mean, you're paying for everything that you get, you just don't know how yet. But
Mm. Oh my God, that was really profound, actually. And you said that better than I could have ever. You're so right. You don't even know yet, but it is going to be paid. Dang.
and the other thing is one of the big things that caused those large groups to rise in power and get more popular is you can kind of parson out the payment between people. So if you
Different
want something,
generations.
generations or even just people in the group. So the impact that you have on yourself for doing certain things might not be as extreme because everyone else is dealing with it too. There are tons and tons of, I don't really want to say covens because covens are just so spooky, ooky, Halloween sounding. They don't sound legitimate at all. But there are groups that will get together and
Yeah,
basically
they're all
make,
in Colorado
yeah, absolutely. And they're going to,
and all these high places.
yep, they will make people all participate in their actions so that they are basically spreading out
Yes.
spreading out the karma.
We talked about this on the pod very briefly. I can't remember what episode or why we were doing it, but it was the first time where I had it kind of confirmed that you could do it this way. And I hate that. And it made me mad but I get it. And so
From my experience, bad witches are typically the ones who operate in groups. Good ones typically don't operate in groups.
mm,
But that's just what I've seen. That's not, a blanket statement of that's how everything is. I'm sure there's
yeah,
some philanthropic groups out there that practice things. But if you are trying to be philanthropic, why would you drag a bunch of other people into that?
interesting. Yeah, you would just be of service,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps. Well, and I'm not okay, so I'm not trying to like really cast hard stones at people who are trying to find a way to cope with life right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a horrific time we're having. Nobody's having fun. Everyone's fighting off like low or high grade depression.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even know what happiness means anymore, but we keep trying to find it. And it's like it's a compounding thing. Like I get why there's appeal and I understand the desire to feel empowered. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, someone give me some of that. You know what I mean? Like I'm right there with it. Like I'm not better at all. And the suffering of my own mind and my own desire to feel important and all that stuff. Like I have a podcast, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I have this random assumption that this matters, right? But at the same time, it's like I think that there is not enough caution tape around this topic. It's like everyone has free will, dog.
Mm-hmm.
I'm cool with that. Do you have free
Yeah.
will? But there's this weird false narrative that's being pushed about how innocuous and how like that everyone's trying the perfect example is everyone's trying to be their own counsel in like a judicial case.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're not going to know the laws, you're
Yep.
not going to do this well,
Yep.
and you're going to try to self-advocate for what you want, and you're just going to self-incriminate.
Yep.
So for the most part, and there are people that are very studious and people that have more dominion in that realm due to their study, and they're the ones that are, they're probably not the one I'm talking to because they're probably
Mm-hmm.
doing great and
Yep.
they are going to continue to do better than me. Like, you know what I mean? So I think there's value too. But all these like chicks, or dudes who are trying to find themselves, just like we all are trying to find ourselves, but then getting lost in this stuff. That's a weird thing to watch.
Yeah. And one of the other issues with that is magic is kind of a counterculture now. Those kind of practices weren't seen that way in the past. Now
Mm-mm.
that it's a counterculture, it's attracting the people who are wanting to remove themselves from society in general.
Mm.
It's attracting people who are wanting to be different. It's not attracting people who are trying to benefit everything as a whole or even their family. It's people who are broken who are looking for some weird self-satisfaction to justify why they turned out the way they did.
Mm.
And that's one of the big issues that I have with the whole hatred of magic and hatred of grimoires and this idea that everything is satanic. When you do that, you make the people who actually want it to be that way gravitate towards it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not creating a situation where there is enough knowledge from people who are not trying to negatively impact things. And the only knowledge out there is people who are believing that I'm doing this for me. I'm getting all of this power. I'm getting all of this. And when you demonize something to that level, it just becomes about that.
True, but I think also too, like what I would like to make a distinct difference between like the new age hippie thing and people who are actually finding and reading grimoires. They are not the same group of people. You know what I mean? I lost your video. Okay. You know what I mean? Like that's very different.
Yeah.
So and they are, I think, probably a little I would say, a little bit more culpable
Mhm.
to the experience that is about to unfold, simply for the understanding of that that's a much deeper level of study and the desire to go and approach it that way. So to each their own. But
Mhm.
I caught, if somebody knows what a grimoire is determined to read it and to use it, there's no accidents happening there.
Well, absolutely. But the accident is the type of person who became interested in that in the first place.
Right. So, but like, do you think they are the same demographic? Like that chick who just wants that dude to fall in love with her, who's
Yes,
willing to do weird stuff, they're then
absolutely.
going to transition?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And the reason
Do you
why I
think it's
say that,
always a slope like that?
I don't think it's always a slope like that, but I do think that those demographics are so closely entwined that it
Mm.
is
Uh-huh.
probably about 99% of them. The ones who are
Mm-hmm.
doing the negative things with grimoires. I mean, you referenced the chick who wants some dude to fall in love with them. I can't tell you how many grimoires there are out there that are specifically meant to be love spells. Now,
Yeah.
whether any of them work, don't know. Doesn't matter to me, honestly. But
But what
even
a
the
horrible way to steal someone's free will.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even the one that I referenced earlier, Le Petit Albert, that is one of the most famous freaking love spells out there. And
Wow.
the thing is that the grimoires that have gotten popular are the bad ones. They're not the good ones. They're not the ones that are beneficial. And there are a lot of people who will argue, oh, well, it doesn't matter what the magic is, it's the intent. You can do something that's intended to be dark to be good. But that isn't what we're seeing with people out there. What we're seeing is we're seeing people who are only seeing the grimoires that can benefit themselves and jumping
Mm-hmm.
all over them. We're not seeing the people who are like, well, I'll direct this at someone else to positively impact their life. Because,
Also, I don't even think the ones that are out are good. Like they're not the real powerful ones.
oh no, absolutely not.
You know what I mean? So that's you're getting like the trash of the elite
Mm-hmm.
and you think it's cool. And
Yeah,
that's cool, I guess, but you got to know you're not having
yeah.
anything that they're not comfortable with you having.
The other thing is with the grimoires is the ones that you can readily find have been translated so many times that there
Mm,
are just things that are either wrong or you can't find them anymore. Like
yeah.
with the Bremlin the Mage, that grimoire, that super famous grimoire, there are tons of things in that actual book that we have no idea how to make. We have no idea how to do anything with. Like the Bremlin
But
of
you know they're
Oil that they
making
mentioned.
more, right? Don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be people making like nice ones now. Cuz now
Oh,
they've
I'm
got
sure there
physics on
are.
their side
Yep,
and like more knowledge.
I'm sure
I mean,
there
I
are. But I
cuz
think
people
that,
think grimoires are so old. It's like there's
yeah,
I bet you we're making the best ones lately.
maybe not the best. There's probably a few that are
No.
pretty good. I think that we have stepped away from using that in our daily lives so much that the only people who would be making ones that were legitimately good would be people who were practicing since they were like toddlers.
Or the Russians.
Well, yeah, yeah, the Russians.
They're like scientifically exploring all
Hmm.
this stuff.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But using science to describe things that are not repeatable is kind of difficult in general.
But like at least they're taking it seriously.
Yeah,
They're like, I know that it's not all BS. Like there's a process here that it is somewhat systemic. Like somewhat, if you do this, this is going to happen.
yeah, absolutely. But it's a different thing to use information like, oh, if I act this way, this will happen, this will be the cause, and making new grimoires that are, I just drew a complete blank. Well, okay. So there's a big difference between following old adages and old rituals and things like that and creating an entirely new ritual. I have a hard time really believing that the Russians are going to have any real headway with making anything unique nowadays with that. That is something that takes hundreds of years. That's not something that.
Well, what I thought maybe why we're making the most interesting, if there was ever a way to make new of
Mhm.
the old, right, would just be that never before in the history of ever can we in one like college football game, get 60,000 souls all doing one thing together.
Absolutely, absolutely. But
so there's like a weird power thing, or is that just all scale? Like the old stuff still works for that?
that's more scale. But
Okay.
that being said, also never before in the history of anything have we ever had the internet to describe all of these thousands of things that are completely incorrect about
The
everything,
disinformation.
basically. Yeah.
Dang, yeah.
So there are so many things that are ingrained in people who are trying to practice that just are not correct at all, that they just get in the way entirely, honestly. And go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I just had a random thought of like, it's when you say things like that, I have this weird natural knee-jerk aversion to, I don't know why, and it's not normal. It should be something I'm very interested in, and I know that. But there's some aversion to the processes of witchcraft that I know are real, that I can't, like, I remember I read this thing and it was talking about some way to charge a knife for something. And I remember just like knowing I can't read further about this. And I wonder sometimes, like, what did I do so wrong that now I can't even like, and not that I want to and I can't. It's like I have a true dislike and aversion. It's weird. I know it's weird, and more of it's fear. I'm afraid of it for people.
Absolutely. I think a large portion of that is society in general. Fun fact, did you know that before the witch trials, the Catholic Church actually had a list of grimoires that they believed worked for light magic?
I did know that, actually.
And after the witch trials, all of the good grimoires kind of just disappeared. So what we're left with is the stuff that's darker. And whether or not you use it in a certain way, I guess, is up to you, but you're always going to have some kind of negative impact from that. I mean, I keep referencing the Gremlin the Mage grimoire just because I know that that's the one that you know about. But even in a perfect situation, going through with that process, you're still going to create a negative result. There's no real positive from that. I mean, yeah, people could argue, well, you're enslaving demons to do what you want, you're doing this, but it's what you want. It's not what
we've talked about that. Yeah, okay, so you're the first person that ever said this to me, and no, I've never even read or seen this or heard this anywhere else, and it feels so right to me. But you're talking about kind of like when you have encountered angelic energy, they feel like cops. Like they're not warm, they're not interested. Like, can you tell me more about that? Can you kind of go into that a little bit? What that feels like?
So, one of the most common instances where you'll run into an angelic energy is when you're either entering something that's bad or you're doing something that's bad. It's there to protect individuals. It's there to keep them from doing certain things that would bring harm to themselves or others. So, in a lot of cases,
while allowing the free will of whatever bad is happening to play out. Dang, so they're never fixing things.
I wouldn't say they're
if you're
never
not meant to be
fixing
there,
things. They're attempting to prevent them, and yeah, you can call on angels for like demonic exorcisms, clearings, things like that. But they're there to kind of keep the scales neutral in a way. And I also believe that the bad is there to keep the scales neutral as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't have both sides to begin with. But when you are interacting with an angelic being, most interactions, unless you've called upon it to do a clearing, to do a cleansing, are guidance. There, don't do that, or do that. It's not warm. It's very matter of fact. This is how you should behave. This is how you should do that. On plenty of investigations that I've gone to, people have done things that have pissed off angelic spirits. I mean,
can we, like what?
There's a there was a church that they turned into a bar. And I would swear to God that was every single sign that you get from a demonic haunting. But it was an angelic who was pissed off.
I have to ask. So that seems a very human thing. to be mad about that. So help me understand more. How human, what are their leniencies towards those more human feelings?
If you are trying, are you asking what they view human feelings
Why did
as?
the angel care much?
Well, because it is taking away basically one of their positions of power, one of their stakes.
Like, gosh, my God, everything's a chess piece.
Mm-hmm.
And you just took a place of worship and made it a place of sin. And now you don't know this, but the angels are going to make you're just trying to make a living. Like you're just an entrepreneur.
Yep.
And he's like, listen, wow. And the angel's like, not here. How dare you? Oh my God, I have a story like that. I'll tell you off air. I'm not going to say that here.
Fair enough.
But it's a church that was I've been inside of it that was turned into something not very churchly. Wow. And I don't know. Nothing seemed to go well there, but
No,
dang.
absolutely not.
Wow. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Love and light, honestly, is not even really how the higher beings operate necessarily. It's a situation of benefit the world versus benefit yourself. And the viewpoint is not, oh, we need to coax them kindly into doing something. It's, we need to tell them what's right, tell them what's wrong, tell them what'll happen if they do that, and then let them make their decisions. But they are very, very matter of fact. If you're not communicating with them in a form of worship, and they are coming to you to converse about something or give you information about something, they are very straightforward, to the point. This is over. This is what should be done.
Why do they take the time out of their existence to answer prayers and answer to help, like if we need help with the exercise, like what that is selfless, right? Like I'm sure they would prefer probably to not.
Oh, absolutely. And you can be selfless while still being very obsessed with your position, is the best way to put it.
Ooh, what do you mean?
Angelics are closer to what we would call right-hand leaning magic, where it's basically benefit the world. And if you're not doing that, there is a sense of, well, you're my enemy now.
Mm-hmm.
They answer prayers because it benefits everyone. I mean, you're not going to hear an angel answer a prayer on someone who's like, oh, I really hope that I win the lottery. That never happened.
Well, okay, so when I was younger, when I was like 18, 19, 20, just left home, really abusive upbringing, I used to, and I remember this vividly, I'd put people down.
Mm-hmm.
And I would not like myself. Like I was self-aware enough to know that was kind of ugly, but I'd still do it. And because I was so low, like my self-esteem was so low and I was very broken. And there is a weird thing that I've noticed only like since 2019, essentially, where I was able to kind of recoup and rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I have always been gentle natured and I've always been sweet with people, but that was so broken down in the timeline. And then there is something where it's like, I'll say something nice to somebody they'll never see again. And then I will self-doubt and be like, are you being a fake piece of, but there is a kickback to me that I feel where it's like, I like the way that made that person feel, which is that book, not The God Delusion, but where altruism, he's basically arguing there's no such thing as altruism. It doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist in nature. God, maybe it is the God. I can't remember. It's on my shelf, but the selfish gene.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's in spirit too. Like you feel it. Like I get something from that and I give something for it.
Yep.
But I do get something.
Yeah. That belief is more egoism than anything, but it is technically true. Now,
altruism does exist. We die for each other. It's weird.
Yeah. Yep. But I have a hard time really. I'm sure angelics get something from benefiting the world, but I have a hard time quantifying that in my mind just yet.
What if it's just fulfillment? It's like that feeling when I get, like, I say something nice, I'm like, okay, that I like how that made, like that that will never go anywhere.
More than that, though.
Probably, yeah, probably so. I'm not,
but
yeah, I mean,
they are.
What?
Go ahead.
When have you encountered them where you were told like, hey, you need to back off, like you're
Plenty of
entering something? So what does that feel like? Where they're gonna come take care of it, or like are they saying, are they being protective of you, or how does that go?
Well, I'll
And what does that
reference the bar.
feel like? How do you know it's angelic? Sorry, I have so many questions.
For me personally, it will almost feel like I'm sitting in an interrogation room with a bright light shining in my face on those kind of
Out of nowhere.
out of nowhere. And
Mm.
those will happen when I'm investigating a place that I probably shouldn't be. Like the bar, for example, that was one of those places where as soon as I walked in
I
the
don't know
door,
what you're talking about when you say the bar.
that
We
it's
haven't talked about this.
we haven't talked about it much. It's the bar that used to be a church that I had referenced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'll
how
give
old
you
were
more
you?
information off air about that, but
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
the long and short of it is they were trying to make the bar extremely edgy. The owner did know it used to be a church, and he was using that as his selling point,
His motif.
but he was making it kind of like a strip club kind of bar,
Mm.
and it caused some issues.
Mm.
And the angelic beings that were protecting the area got very angry and started behaving more like demonics would.
What kind of behavior?
Scratches, pushing, loud noises, bangs, throws. You would get leaks coming from the ceiling occasionally. Nothing like mold or bugs, but it was a lot of the classic demonic activities. I mean, you'd go in there and they would hammer into you, just like they would at a demonic investigation. You'd get headaches, you'd get sick. They were just trying to get people out, but you could tell they did not like that owner at all.
And what kind of spiritual legality gave them? Is it because it's their land, like that it was somehow consecrated in their name? Like what gave them the ability to do that?
Well, I think spiritual legality is a little bit of a long shot for that.
Okay.
I take it more as, let's say you're occupying a territory as an army,
Mm.
and you technically don't legally have right to that territory, but you're occupying it and you're working there, you're doing all your things there. It's more like an enemy invasion entering into an occupied tent, occupied just base.
It didn't matter who you were. If you were doing stuff like that, you were going to be,
You would piss them off. If you were there
yeah,
doing
under
that, you'd
threat.
piss them off.
Yeah. Okay. And so when you felt that for the first time, like the first time you ever encountered that, wherever it was, and you did time stop? Like, how did you know that you were like the light?
It wasn't so much time stop. It was more like my perception of everything around me stopped.
Okay.
So things were still going on. It was just I didn't recognize that things were going.
Okay.
That being said, I'm sure, there was some kind of time dilation because things that you experience in your mind are
Mm.
on a different time zone basically from everything else.
Yeah.
But no, it was just immediate, like, you shouldn't be investigating here. You're not going to be clearing anything here. You're not going to get rid of it. You just need to tell this
Mm.
guy to stop doing that shit. And obviously the guy wasn't going to. He spent probably more money than I've ever seen in my life on that place. So there's no way that that would benefit anyone if he stopped other than an angelic. So why would he?
How do you think that ended? Do you think the angels won?
I don't know if it ended, honestly. I haven't
Dang.
been in contact with them in God knows how long, but
Mm.
I'm pretty sure they're still running, and I'm sure they're still experiencing the same issues.
Wow. That's so wild. Was there ever a time that you experienced them where they were coming to basically aid you in what you were doing?
Yes, but typically that's to call on them for them to do that. Rather
And you
than,
did?
yes. The way
What
I
was
go
that
about my
like?
investigations is a bit different, though. A lot of it is research into what is going on before I get there.
To know who's doing it?
Yeah, to know who's doing it, to know what's going on, know if there's anything darker at play. And if there is, sometimes I will call on something beneficial to me or an angelic or something to get involved. But it's not as clear cut as just, hey, this angel, come down here. For a lot of them, if you want like legitimate reaction and like actual events to happen, there are kind of rituals that you do to get them in. And the text message stream that I sent you earlier, there's an explanation to one of the rituals on it. So if you want to read
Mm.
through that. But
Mm.
one of the things with angels is when you're calling on them for things that are extremely beneficial for something, or something more than just them stepping in and being there for a couple minutes to get rid of something. You
Mm,
have to prove to them that you're willing to do what it takes for them to do it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean something damaging to you, but that does
mm.
mean there's a lot of intense work going on behind the scenes for that. You have to spend time to do it, and you have to stick to a certain behavior, certain action for quite a while. When you look through a lot of the white magic, when it comes to angelic magic, it is, those are longer than dark magic grimoires by a lot. They're, I mean, just,
Almost seems like the dark is always the laziest way.
oh, absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know, it's like always the laziest way.
Absolutely. Well, one of
Dang.
them is with the dark, they want to prove to you that you want them in your life. Angelics want you to prove to them that you deserve
Dang. Dang. Why don't they just come? I'm just kidding.
it. Now, obviously, that somewhat spits in the face of a lot of metaphysical practices. And yes, calling on their name, invoking them does do something, but it's not as clear cut as that in the long run.
Well, it's different than asking for their like unique and whole consciousness to, or even a
Yeah,
portion of that to be present.
yeah,
That is a very
absolutely.
different request.
Yeah.
Like there are echoes of their energy that are more powerful than these demonics, like some demonics. You know what I mean? Like the light has a lot of unique strength.
hmm
They just don't organize or act with such ferocity and
Yep.
beguile as the other
Yeah.
side. Like you said, you got to go find them and then you got to go give up something you probably don't want to give up, either your
hmm
time or your food or your ability to like be disciplined about anything. And the angel's like, can you just do this for a little bit so I can come down there and help you guys? And
Yep.
we as humans were like, that's a no for me, dog.
Yep.
And then the other side's like, no, no, no. Not only can you indulge in what you want,
hmm
and then we'll also make you powerful. But why wouldn't, there's just, they're playing with different decks,
Yeah.
but
It's,
that is what it is.
yeah. Um, on that note, also, when it comes to organization, I will say there are certain angels that are basically the opposite of certain demons.
Yeah.
So in a
You've
lot
shared
of,
that before.
yeah, in a lot of different types of clearings for demonics, you want to bring in the angel that is specific to that demonic. Now, there is an extremely long list that I can't even remember. I have books on it that I read to figure it out later, but not now. But for example, if you're dealing with a demonic that is focused on surgical medicine, the dark side of that, then you're going to call on an angel like Raphael, which is an angel of healing. Things like that. It gets really complicated and it's kind of almost annoying in a way, just because there's so much friggin' work that you have to do to get rid of demonics and get the right angelic involved, that it almost feels like there's a stopgap in a way where they're trying to prevent you from actually contacting them.
Well, it's like red tape.
Yeah,
Oh, you mean the angels? You
yeah,
mean like there's too much red tape?
yeah,
Do you think that that's just like a modern perspective? Like, do you think that,
absolutely. I think the red
like,
tape's
okay,
created by modern humans. I don't necessarily think that the angels are the ones that are creating the red tape. I just think that we've lost so much throughout history,
knowledge?
so much knowledge, so much information that it's just difficult.
Well, and you have to go seek it. That's the other thing too, because the demons come to you,
hmm
and that's hard too. So it's like, dang, and there's no benefit. I mean, I guess, yeah, like I get what you're saying. Well, I have a question about the whole. Why is it? Because you said something. I noticed you said it earlier. You were like, I have to do a lot of study beforehand, and I
hmm
knew what you were alluding to. What you were alluding to is if I study the behavior of the haunting, I can usually deduce which demon it is,
Yep.
and then figure out which angels to call upon. But my question is, like, why do they have calling cards?
I've wondered that in the past. Part of me wants to say that they're just habits on how they interact, but then the other part of me wants to say that they're almost required by just the universe in general to have those calling cards, so that there is a way to get rid of them if you actually want to. I think it's just a way to make things more fair, because honestly, if they weren't more fair, we would probably just be completely ruled by demonics at this point.
I agree. I agree. because they are much more active.
Mm.
Okay, so I have so many places I want to go, and it's like, okay, so what is your opinion about the Nephilim and the bloodlines and the traces you still find?
So
And
that
do
is
you think you are one? Because I think you are one.
I don't know.
I asked Terry the other day, I said, do you have any six fingers in your family? Because you guys are really gifted for no reason and like freaking up in the mountains, which is where all the bloodlines hid.
So when it comes to the Nephilim, there are so many different accounts of what they are that it's really difficult for me to fully get a direct opinion on them without being swayed a little bit.
I will give my explanation of what I mean because I don't
Mhm.
know the ones you know.
Mhm.
So I'll go to the biblical ones.
Mhm.
This belief system that these people that there are energies that fell or in some narrative and procreated and shouldn't have,
Mhm.
and that there was I'm gonna say for myself, I believe there were giants. I think we have plenty of proof of that. Don't know why though. Like, was it just the CO2 in the air? What
Mhm.
what's going on? We had megafauna. I believe that we have plateaus that we call plateaus, but they're
Mhm.
petrified. Like, it's just weird. Like, I believe these things. Maybe I'm crazy. But like, so what's your opinion on the fact that there would be this weird gifted bloodline that's somehow still around? That is prone to giantism, prone to inhuman strength,
There
and prone
probably
to
is. There probably is, but bloodlines have been, I don't want to say meddled with because that
diluted.
sounds like, but they have been so diluted throughout history that I think that everyone has a little bit of that in them nowadays. It's just whether or not they've been in the experiences to develop those
Like
abilities.
the RH thing. That's weird,
No,
right?
absolutely.
And they all get haunted at a young age, and then it ruins them. So, like, this isn't a power trip.
What's going on?
Oh, I think I lost you. Hey. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, sorry
You're
about
good.
that, everyone. Some
No,
weird technical difficulties.
we're talking about some weird stuff. No, go ahead.
So, when it comes to bloodlines, yes, I do think they exist. I think I lean more towards nurture versus nature, typically with that, just because I think that it's too easy for someone to think, oh, well, I have it in my blood, so I'm better than someone else, or I can do this more. It's almost a stopgap for ego, in my opinion.
But I want you to know from the perspective the only experience I have with these people are like they are broken. Like they are this mechanic who only just recently found out he's this bloodline, but he's been haunted since he was a child and pursued by demonics on purpose as a child. The people that I have seen have been ruined by that, and they don't even know why. And only because they started looking into this stuff did they come to find maybe there's a reason why they had these weird experiences. So I haven't been exposed to. I did read that was a thing. Like, I know, I guess maybe in weird corners, but the only exposure I have are these basically victims, I think. And there's this one woman, and she lost her daughter. Her daughter basically her heart was facing the wrong way in this chest cavity. No doctor would admit that was true. But she has this weird history in her bloodline where everyone seemed to have 6 fingers and 6 toes, and they were really oddly strong, and she's oddly strong, but they were tucked away. And she said her grandfather and her father used to always say, A, that they were from the stars, and B, that it was important to remain hidden. So there's weird stuff there.
Yeah, no, there absolutely is. And maybe it's just the fact that it's on a podcast. It's a little bit difficult to fully get into that because there are people who take that with stride and in the worst ways possible.
You mean just like outright lie?
Either outright lie or, for example, the cult that you were talking about earlier where they were obsessed with their bloodline. It is, when you get back to genetics on that kind of front, there is a very easy way for people to feel superior. And
it's kind of weird how quick it happens too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's just a moment. I mean, you hear all the people who are talking about, oh, well, I'm related to the first king of England. I'm related to blah, blah, blah. As soon as they do some weird genealogy report, and it's like,
yeah.
What does that matter nowadays? I think that, yes, bloodlines can impact your experiences, but I think that a large portion of it is choosing to go with it or not.
Free will.
Mm-hmm.
There was this thing that guy that said he was a bloodline member who had been completely ruined by his bloodline and completely and was fighting back now actively. He was saying that basically there were these rituals that would basically gift the individual participating in it with the luck and benefit and basically boon of other generations. So you would steal it from the rest for that one lifetime. And I felt that was true. And I felt that he was being honest that was possible. But he was also indicating that you could break that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, his avenue was through Christian faith. What are your thoughts on a process either through Christian faith or otherwise to address something where someone that you don't even know made a decision like that?
That is a difficult one. I do think that people's faiths are important, but I'm not one to lean towards any particular faith in general. My belief is that they're all kind of the same, just different interpretations of the same thing. And we did talk about this a little bit earlier. I kind of think a large portion of the gods that we now worship are man-made. Almost like thought forms where a large group of people got together, grabbed some level of divinity in their belief and just ran with it. The problem with that, because what you're describing is basically a curse, is to break a curse, you also sometimes have to lose things. I think one of the big things that not so much embracing faith that helped him was removing himself from the family in general. I think that was more important than embracing faith. I think the faith probably made it easier, but he did have to make a sacrifice to get rid of that.
So you're saying you can't stay in that family in the trappings of it, good or bad, and then just pray a certain prayer to Jesus and that will break whatever is occurring. Interesting.
Everything is an exchange, basically. He has to
so
give
there
up
is
something
no
to get...
in your world, there's no higher power that can just usurp in that way.
I wouldn't necessarily say it couldn't. I would say it doesn't want to. If free will is to be believed, then you have to give up something to get a reaction, to get something in return. It's not a situation where, oh, someone's just going to swoop in and save me.
So maybe even the process of the prayer, right? Because that's time and energy.
Yep.
And it's worship, right? It's like maybe even that is part of the process of
It definitely
payment.
helped it, but I guarantee you that if he stayed with the family, and I don't know his full story because I'm not 100% on who specifically you're talking about, but if he had stayed with the family, none of it would have worked, is my opinion on that.
Well, and he doesn't really talk about being spiritually cursed. He was just saying kind of that is something that can be done.
Yes. And
which I didn't know it could be done. I thought that was wild because I'm like, how can you trade away someone else's experience?
Well,
that isn't even here yet. But then I have to lean back on we make choices to how we come in and to who we come in. So free will starts a little bit before.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like you can't convince me that you don't know you're about to go into a circumstance that's under certain spiritual pressures.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe you're on that duty to learn how to break free.
And
that's such a chicken or the egg thing.
My opinion on free will before birth is a little bit different, though. Not that I'm saying that yours is incorrect, just that my belief is that you are meant to learn certain lessons. When you learn them is up to you, but you will always be put in your journey as you reincarnate. You will always be put into a situation similar to what that kind of situation would be. It's just when you do it.
I agree with you, though. I think that's true as well.
So
I don't think that we get so specific. I think it's more of like if there's no words, right? We make words, but if there's almost a vibration of experience and we call it oppression or we call it abuse, we call it the breaking of a psychology, but it's got its own vibrational match, right? So your vibration of need for victimhood is going to match someone's vibration of what they were
Yep.
willing to victimize.
Yep.
So I don't know that it gets, and even that takes form in, nobody really said it had to be sexual. It just had to trigger the right vibration.
Yep.
But then in this case it was, or in this, you know what I mean? So we sign up for these vibrational experiences, and then we get here and we get ruined by the way that they manifest in the physical, because we didn't plan that all that well. Like our experience is still based in spiritual law, but nobody said it was going to be this or that. Like,
Yeah.
and then we stumble, right? Like it gets hard.
Yeah, I think you don't agree to the experiences that you have to do in your journey. You agree to when you get them.
Say that one more time.
I personally think that you don't agree to the experiences that you are required to do in your journey. You agree with when you're going to run into them in your cycle.
I agree. Because you're the one, I mean, if we're following, and we are, because I've thought about it more. When you first said that about like the whole, it needs to be balanced, I rejected that pretty harshly, emotionally and mentally. And as I've kind of grown, because that was like a year ago, I've kind of thought more that makes a little bit more sense. I know that I still, like, in this lifetime, for whatever reason, I've chosen to be averse to certain things in the dark side. But I also do believe very strongly that in a recent lifetime, I don't think I made those same choices, because I have flashes of just knowing I didn't. With that said, it's like, dang it, where was it going? We were talking about the experience, when. So that's what I think is confusing, maybe, because I believe that you can devolve and get stuck. And
Absolutely.
I believe that if you no longer become of service to the whole in the experience of it all, like if you you spiral out too badly, you can be removed from the game. I do think that. So, you can, but we also have free will. So I think it's like, if you are contracted, for instance, to murder one person for whatever reason, and then you say, I did sure like that, and then you just do it a ton, you are now really impacting a lot of people through your free will. And that's still okay, because we agreed to come into this collaborative experience. We know what risks that can come with. But the cost to that, if you don't immediately go to the holding tank of the dark side, right? I don't think you're allowed to just do that over and over and over again, because now you're not really of service. Is that accurate to you? What do you think?
That's difficult. I believe that there's a certain amount of evil that is acceptably brought into the world and is reincarnated over and over. Personally, I don't know if they would full on remove you from the cycle entirely for that specifically. I think it would have to be multiple lifetimes of that.
I agree. Yeah, I don't mean one time.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you can't, you've gone so dark, there's no darker you can go. So over and over, you're just repeating this dark lifetime. And because that is truly getting stuck, because then karma decrees that you can't come in at a higher consciousness.
Yeah.
So every time you're back, you're stuck. But I wonder too, well, I guess that's the graduation, if you're so good. But yeah, okay. So that does that with question. Would that then mean that it would be true that the way out of the incarnation process still would be the good side? Because you can go, you can't get out going all right. But I agree with you. You can't get out without going dark. I don't think it's possible.
I think that the way out it's difficult to say that it's the good side. I think it's more when you've learned the lessons that you're meant to learn.
You're right. Yeah, you just completed the curriculum.
So I think it's more balance.
You're right.
Than anything. Because, I mean, you look at...
I misspoke. I agree with you more than what I just said, for sure. I just kind of forgot, because I get excited. But you're right. It is, you have to punch all the tabs. You can't. And there is no, like you said, time isn't real. So it isn't, you got to go down in a timeline. I'm thinking in a linear timeline, but it's like, no, that doesn't exist. You just got to do 50% of this, 50% of that. Complete them all. Don't run from them.
Yep.
And be present for them. And then, like, start being a guide.
Yep.
Which seems like a thankless job.
Yeah.
I can't say.
I feel like there's a large majority of them who step out of the reincarnation cycle and don't end up being guides either. Yeah. Honestly.
We've talked about that too, that there's different jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the ones that do guide work, do you think that's a pride thing or an altruism thing, or like, what do you think that is? Or that people are just good for it, good at it,
It's difficult.
like a job aptitude?
I think altruism is a difficult thing to claim for guides. I think that what guides are doing is they're finding other energies that are similar to how they were when they
Mm-hmm.
were in the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's
There's something
entirely
so
altruism.
intimate about that.
To me, I think it's more preventing people from making the same mistakes that they did,
Mm-hmm.
but almost in a way of self-fulfillment and not altruism. Because in some senses, guides are experiencing the exact same thing you are when you are. They very well are most likely that sounds. They very well are probably, in my opinion, almost fixing themselves while they're guiding.
Don't say
Fixing.
it's like a vacation.
No, it's not a vacation.
Are they just like hanging out, like watching the soap opera and be like, look at what Sterling's about to do? I would be so,
Maybe some of them.
right? Well, but the ones that are with us from birth till death, those,
Mhm.
the committed ones,
Yeah.
they're probably not joyriding. They're
No,
probably
they're
like, all right,
not
we got to get
joyriding.
this soul going.
Yeah, I think
She's
describing it as
behind schedule.
a vacation is also kind of incorrect. Almost like when they help you make the decisions that they felt like they should have made in their life, it's almost like they're fixing their own bad mistakes as well.
Why would that need still be present, you think? That desire? It just
Everything
is.
has its own ego, no matter what it is. Even the best of things and the worst of things have ego. And I feel like when you get down to the brass tacks of things, ego is kind of one of the defining traits of being alive or even as a spiritual being, just existing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if everything melded into one and had no semblance of, oh well, this is what I did or I need to do this for this, then I don't think we'd be experiencing things in the same way we are now.
Well, the implication of what you just said, if it's true, is profound because it implies that a soul would be dissatisfied
Mm-hmm.
with something about its experience enough to have a desire and an appreciation of changing that experience on some level,
Mm-hmm.
which would maybe imply that what are your thoughts on this? What if it's not as much about like, or what if there's a both, right? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
what if we're allotted X amount of timelines and it's a lot?
Mm-hmm.
There's enough room to do it all.
Mm-hmm.
But like, what if you get great? I'm just spinning. Like, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
my brain. I have no intuitive thought about this. That's like, what if then you got done and you're like, dang, I got an 85.
Yeah, it's
And
extra
then you're
credit.
like, I am motivated, or I'm just like, I'm motivated to, like, I murdered way too many times. I'm going to go
Mm-hmm.
be with somebody who is prone to that behavior and try to help them not do it. Like, there's something about my experience that I'm trying to, because you're right, ego is still present and free will.
Mm-hmm.
What would make a soul that doesn't have to be locked into this experience come back and be helpful?
Hmm.
Just a thought.
There's some argument to be made that things would just get boring on the other side, outside of
Mm-hmm.
reincarnation. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought it just froze. I mean, if the other side is basically just either the absence or the maximum amount of experience all at once, then perhaps they just don't want to deal with it. It's just boring. I mean, I'd feel
What are your
bored just
thoughts?
sitting around.
Right. No, for sure. Well, and Spirit talks about that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, someone's uncle will be like, "Oh, I miss the food, or I miss the
Mm-hmm.
music, or like I miss the human." There's human things.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see the demonic energy be so jealous of us.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something here. Like everyone, I don't like it when people. I've always been vocal about this. I don't like it when people just sit here. Yeah, it's hard here. I will always give that up. It is
Mm-hmm.
not easy to be here. But I've seen enough and had enough communication to see the appeal of where we are
Mm-hmm.
for some reason. The dark wants it, the light misses it, something's up.
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing, there's something happening here that's good, and we just don't see it till it's over.
Yeah.
or when it's not available anymore. So it's like, but do you give any stock at all to these people who say when you die, don't go to the light, like that this is a soul trap, that you're supposed to jump dimension? Like, what are your thoughts on all this?
My thoughts are they are currently alive, so how do they know any more than I do or the next guy
Yeah.
does?
No, you're right.
I think that if it is a soul trap, then we're gonna
It
get
is what
caught
it
in it.
is.
If
Then we stuck,
hmm
baby.
yeah.
I agree. I think it's a very it's a hidden nihilism
hmm
because there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
And I think the teaching that they say is right to the dark side. So
hmm
I have trouble trusting that because they're always like, avoid the white light, find somebody to guide. Like, it's like, no, don't find anyone to guide you.
I just I always have those kind of problems with people who are talking about like things like that and even near death experiences. They are actively currently alive. And unless they have some, you know, connection to their past life when it passed, which I highly doubt they do, then they know no more than the next guy on the street does.
You're so logical. Like, I agree with you so much. I feel like when we hang out at your house, we're always goofing. We don't really talk like this, but I love this. This is the best. No, I mean, like, you're so right. And I also wonder too, I always got bothered by all of these things that can be true at the same time, but don't
hmm
matter in the same way.
hmm
So people who are like, oh, free will can't exist if time isn't real.
hmm
It's like in a layer, but guess what? If you don't go pay rent tomorrow, you're going to have a problem.
Yep.
Like, and it doesn't really matter at this here and now, whether time's real, whether it's linear, whether your soul is trapped or not. It's like at our functional level, what if there's any knowledge from that, you should just be empowered. You
hmm
should just feel like, hey, it's going to be fine.
Yep.
This is hard, but we got this. You've had it before and you're going to have it again. We
hmm
got this. Grit and bear it, find the happiness, find the joy. It is there. Hopefully, I promise. But when somebody gets into that nihilistic spirituality where they come up, and I agree with them, I
hmm
agree time isn't really real the way we see it. I agree that free will is, the concept of it is then muted by
Yeah.
the fact that I think time is like a book. I think that you can access all parts of it, but I think you can flip to the front, but then in its internal layers, it has very real meaning.
hmm
So what are we arguing about? You can't go shoot up what you want just because you think time isn't real.
hmm Yeah.
And that all that has been done is.
Yeah. That crowd that is so obsessed with this, to me, it almost feels like tombstone worship in a way.
Tell me more.
If you believe that nothing matters, or you believe that, oh, free will doesn't exist, really what you're telling me is that you're worshiping a way to get out of it. You're worshiping the
Yeah.
ultimate death.
All
So,
you can focus on is what's wrong.
exactly. It is, and that idea goes on both sides too. The people who are
Yeah.
so obsessed with living their life according to religious texts, according to whatever, are also kind of the same because they are viewing life as only being there to die. It's
Mm.
just different
Yeah.
ways to say that.
Ooh, that's a weirdly interesting statement. You're saying somebody who lives their, like in the complete refrain of life, like the
Yes.
experience, the
Like
broad depth of it.
let's say the
Yeah.
nun
I see.
who prays all day long and does nothing else for 50, 60 years of their life. They're worshiping their death. They're not experiencing their life at all. And yes, you're sacrificing certain things to get certain things, but there's something almost depressing about that to an
You're
extent.
not wrong. I always say that that's a like that we probably set aside lifetimes for that type of
hmm
piousness because that is a sacrifice. Like that's unique and extreme. But you were comparing that to the nihilism is very interesting because it is. I've never once thought about it that way, but you're not wrong.
It's
The
just
whole
the
like,
other extreme.
dang, because so I would look at, like, okay, here's weird, it's very human of me. I would look at the lifetime as a nun as, like, of the light, probably
Mm-hmm.
abstained from stuff I don't need, probably didn't drink, probably wasn't promiscuous, like, all the things. And then you have, to me, that's, like, a good mark.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's the other side of a coin, the other one would mark as equally,
Mm-hmm.
where you're like, screw the world, fuck
Yep.
patriarchy, like, all that stuff.
Yep.
Because to me, that seems lazier.
It does, but
Because the other one's kind of hard.
when your entire life has become so ridiculously pious that you don't know anything else,
Yeah.
you stop actually sacrificing things and you start just following the habit of doing the same thing every single day, be it prayer, be it the dude who sits in their bed all freaking day long for years on end. It stops being good when it becomes habit. When it's easy and you're used to it, it stops being a benefit and it starts just being an anchor.
That is so interesting of a perspective, because you're not wrong at all, but I've never thought of it that way ever. But like, so I guess the assumption would be that there would be some spiritual benefit that would be
Mhm.
occurring for all of that.
Oh, I'm sure there is.
And you're, well, I mean, you're kind of arguing that, like, even if there isn't, people would still do it.
Yeah, they would.
Oh,
There is, with people who are that pious, there's a lot of fear of if they don't continue their habits, then they will damage
they're
themselves in
damned.
some way.
That's not really good. That's
Yeah,
fear-driven life.
it is, and you're also not learning things in that lifetime.
Dang it, you're ruining this for me, because you're not wrong. If you're not actively
Making
growing
mistakes. Yep.
a muscle, dang it. Like, you better be floating. You better be in Tibet floating, or is it worth it? Dang it, I don't want to see it that way. But that's not necessarily wrong. I mean, like, because there's like lukewarm Christians, there's going to be lukewarm nuns, there's going to be
Mm-hmm.
lukewarm monks. They're just like, ugh, because that's a good way to not do much. I hate to say that. I don't mean that badly at all.
Now, I will say, I'm not talking about the people who, lived 20, 30 years of their life and then suddenly realized things were wrong in their life and then decided to become a nun who does nothing
Yeah,
other
that's
than
very
pray all day.
different.
I'm talking about the people who that's all they do ever.
Yeah, I agree. Well, or, I mean, even if it is the person who gave up and used it as that way, like, that's okay. People can do that. That's free
Mm-hmm.
will. People give up by marrying into somebody they don't love. Like,
Yeah,
we do
absolutely.
dumb stuff to chill and stop having to work so hard. Life is hard. We get it. So we're not talking mad at all about these people, but I'm recognizing now in this moment of, like, adulthood that I hate. Yeah, there's gonna be people who are just not accessing any growth there, even though I would look at that and say, oh, that's a lifetime that everyone would choose to
Mm-hmm.
experience all that growth. It's like, no, even people in that life
And
will
stagnation.
not be growing. I don't know. That's crazy to consider.
I mean,
I will say, though, go
some
ahead.
some could argue that the knowledge that you're getting from reading those scriptures is the benefit that they're getting, but you don't carry that into your next life.
Interesting point about that carrying into a next life. There was a story of these brothers.
Mm-hmm.
They were basically approached both in their sleep, but they didn't tell each other about it. They didn't know that each other had been. One had been approached by Baal, and then one was a guy named Surjet or something.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, they were like apparently equal level,
Mm-hmm.
but that at one point the Surjet rose above Baal, and there was kind of this weird thing, and they didn't. There was a knowingness of the political nature after they came together, and they were like, we know these people, but there was no use of each other against each other at all. They did not know that they were doing this. But what was weird was one of them, or his brother, he was, I mean, kind of a little bit like you, maybe, where he was just very naturally good at opening portals. And so when he made an agreement in his dreams at a very young age and said yes to this entity, he would get a knowingness about just this place he had to go.
Mm-hmm.
And if he didn't go, all this horrible stuff would start happening. So he just got coached into knowing, like, I better go when I get this feeling. So he's basically working for, these energies that are
Mm-hmm.
so negative, and just not even like a slave to it. Whereas this other entity, his brother,
Mm-hmm.
he was told by some spiritual thing, this reality, where he said all he had to do was exist because he had a natural ability. Him being incarnate held something closed, and when he died, there would be another version, and all his job was to be here in the physical form. So that's weird, right? Because then you have a soul who has this job that's so profound and so unknown. So he just wanders. You know what I mean? He doesn't make any money. He struggles with adjusting because he's here on this mission that has no basis in humanity. It like, to me, that seems like a curse.
Yeah. I think there's a very big issue amongst the metaphysical and spiritual community of people who are so obsessed with what their purpose is in this life that they don't do anything else.
To have free, to choose anything. I agree.
Yeah, he might have existed for some great purpose, but if he just walked around, did nothing, had no job, did nothing, then that's not really having a life to begin with.
Dude, you're literally like, I need to run all this by you a lot more than I do, because you're like the skeptic I need, because your logic's very real, and I'm over here like, oh my god, this poor guy, and you're like, dude, he could just be lazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah.
But
on top of that, he was told once that he was there for some very, very extreme reason.
That's a good point. Well, yeah, that's good. He didn't really say what he was keeping close. Dang. Yeah, you're right. Dang. Well, so what are your thoughts on the monkey thing, the monkey phenomenon, the like grinning, dark, shadowy monkey entity? What is that? What is that?
I still haven't formulated an opinion on that one, actually. I think...
Can I tell you what I've heard?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I've consumed a lot of shit. The reason I'm so interested is because I've just been down this rabbit hole, and now I'm letting my nerd out. Okay, so that was one of the entities that basically would guide this guy to where he needed to go. So they would show up when he was on the right direction, or they would show up when he wasn't obeying. And at one point in this narrative of this story that seems heavily vetted, because this guy who had it on YouTube, it said it took him like 1.5 years to really get it to where he was ready to present it. So I don't know what that means. But basically what happened was the brother who was working for Ball decided he wanted out at like 13, 14. Found out there was no out. In this small community that was so spiritually active, for whatever reason, a place of high strangeness, this guy that was good at keeping things shut and didn't ever really have a spiritual experience himself because he said no. His friend, someone he knew from high school and college, had said yes and was having this very weird, dutiful experience in his dreamscape. And he brought some of his friends into it using grimoire magic, basically. Taught them how to lucid dream, taught them the codes to get into this other realm thing, allegedly. All this, right? But at one point, the guy who had no spiritual gifts, he hears his brother fall out of his bed, his brother's scratched up, he can't see anything. And he's basically saying they were in the house. They're not supposed to be in the house. And so then he calls his friend that he'd had this crazy experience with in the car. Because the story started where the guy with no gifts had an experience with the guy that he thought was his good friend, who found out he wasn't. They were being chased by a demonic energy. And he alleged that he saw his buddy sprint off at a speed that was unnatural. And then came back drenched in like licorice stuff, whatever that means. So he was like, and never got an explanation. He was like, so I just had the weirdest time of my life, and my buddy just tried to sweep it under the rug. Well, after this happened to his brother, he called his friend. He's like, you're into this weird stuff. Like, I don't know what's going on. And he basically alleges, and he had a witness allegedly, that he watched his friend basically like zone out and then grow a little bit, like to where he had to bend down to get into an access point that normally he never did. And he sat on a couch and like wouldn't speak. And then when he came back later, he was like exhausted and sweating out of nowhere. And he was back to normal, like his normal size. And he's like, everything's okay. I took care of them. He said, where I went, there were many more of them. He said, I'm about to die. Like, I need to go sleep. And apparently he left. And then the brother who didn't know, because these stories came together later, there was a 2-year period where they were gone. And it was after it. So the timeline did add up to where the night that he said, my friend said he took care of it. He shape shifted in front of me allegedly,
Mhm.
and then wouldn't even look at me or explain to me what was going on as he sat on my couch. And then as soon as like things were over, he was sweating and normal. I don't know, it's just weird. Like there was enough of it that felt earnest somehow. Anyways, but that was the first thing about the monkey thing, was like
Mhm.
that they were basically agents of the synergy
They could be enforcers.
and like grinning all the time and like
Yeah.
just playing on fear and dread.
They were probably enforcers in that situation then. They were probably just there to basically bend the will. There's something with a lot of demonics that you'll run into where they will have almost puppets that they keep
Mm-hmm.
with them,
Mm-hmm.
and could have been that, honestly.
That's what I've
Go ahead.
read. Is that the whole, like, do you think Mothman is a puppet for the Lilith energy? Because people keep claiming that they wake up from dreams that are highly sexual, where
Hmm.
they feel very abused, and they'll look up and they'll see some like insectoid type thing.
I don't necessarily know if the insectoid thing that they're seeing is Mothman specifically. I've recently ran into quite a lot of weird insectoid demonics lately.
Ever since Minnesota?
No, before that, way before that. No, Minnesota was a awakening of Native American energies that I ran into. That was the
Just
Mothman.
because you were on their property?
Yeah, that and just a bunch of other things. But I hesitate to attribute that to Mothman specifically
Mm-hmm.
because of the stories that were people had of the Mothman prior to all of these events, where the Mothman would show up right before a big event happened.
Yeah,
I
like
think it's
the nuclear stuff.
yeah. I think it's something that they are interpreting as the Mothman because that's the easiest way for them to describe it.
And it's known in pop culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And I would point them towards Beelzebub instead of Lilith for that. Lilith tends to be more, when it comes to the energies that she has around her, tends to be more incubus, succubus kind of energy rather than bug type energy, insectoid type energy. From my experience, Beelzebub tends to be a little bit more insectoid. I mean, it's the Lord of the Flies for one. But
Mm-hmm.
it's yeah, it's a bit difficult nowadays anyway with that. I think we're kind of in a period where there's new demons getting born into the world that we maybe
How?
have not seen them recently. I mean, I've gotten so many investigations lately that were demonic, and that it's normally like maybe 1% of investigations are demonic, but now it's almost all of them.
Do you think that CERN thing, the eclipse CERN thing, had anything to do with that?
Yes, it could have.
My gut keeps pointing there, and I'm not that way. I don't care about that stuff, but I think something happened.
The other thing that I noticed a big uptick on after it happened was there was a huge meteor shower at the same time there was a massive solar flare just a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that, after that, things got kicked up pretty intensely.
Well, I told Terry this, and you know I never exaggerate anything because I'm more often to think I'm crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I've had visual stuff pop up, nothing big, but
Mm-hmm.
remember in your backyard
Mm-hmm.
recently? And it's gone away a little bit as I started speaking about it
Mm-hmm.
because I started just telling Terry about it when it would happen. But I would see stuff in my periphery, and that's not me. I have almost zero
Mm-hmm.
visual cues. So I was thinking, ooh, that's interesting because that's a frequency issue.
Yeah. I don't know if things spiked up people's ability to recognize these things or
I
if
think
these
something
things
did.
have just exponentially grown.
What are the angels doing? If that's true, like if there's a change in the balance, is it being allowed?
Well, I think it's a little bit to do with the conversation that we had over text message about resetting. That's kind of why I think we're in a period of resetting in general. I mean, we're getting all of these horrible things happening year after year after year after year. And then we have a massive uptick of negative energies. It's just.
But then couldn't you see how that would really, I mean, really point towards the religious stuff where
I
people are
could.
like,
But I don't like to say that I'm not religious. I like to say that I don't believe any of the religions that we have are right.
yeah. Do you think there are tidbits that are?
Yeah. In every religion, there's
Here's like an
something.
example that I thought was weird, and I'm just gonna probably bore you, but I'm just gonna get through it real fast. This was found apparently like so in the text where there are 4 listed women, like the wives of the fallen, the first like wives, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't find 2 of the names, but one of them's Lilith and one of them's this like I can't remember the name of it, but
Mm-hmm.
and then she's mentioned only once in the actual Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And this other thing was on some like manuscript found that's not really included, but is considered not in the Apocrypha either. But it's just like a text that's considered okay. And in the Bible, you know how they always say like brother of, son of, father, like they don't talk about the women. And there's this like very gifted family, and they're talking about like how gifted they are with agricultural knowledge and how gifted they are with all this stuff. And they mention a man and they say brother to, and it's that chick's name. And it's just this weird like little coincidence maybe, but that's the whole story, was that they were like the wives were given over for this knowledge to accelerate in society essentially. And you know, you're just like, oh, how curious, because either someone's just really good. Oh my gosh, I have to ask you about this. Are you familiar with the Russian, like the belief that the Byzantine Empire basically wrote all of the ancient, basically alleges that Rome and Greek isn't real, and like ancient Rome isn't real, and that the story of Jerusalem perfectly mirrors the Byzantine empires as they rose and fell. And he tried to present it to the UN, all this stuff. What are your thoughts? I didn't read the book. I might, but
I'm hesitant
it's weird
on that.
Yeah.
I do think that history is, to an extent, fabricated in a lot of cases. I'm very hesitant to say that an entire nation didn't necessarily exist right now, but I haven't read the book either yet. I probably will. But
it's feeling real Cliff Notey for me.
Yeah.
I feel like I might skim it. I'll be like, what's the gist, guys?
Yeah. There have been so many different empires, nations, whatever have you, that have existed, that even if what they're saying has some merit of truth, I can guarantee you there was at least a smaller nation that was what we consider Rome now. I don't know. I just kind of don't really agree with this weird idea of stepping in and being like, oh, well, that never existed and I'm going to prove it to everyone.
Yeah, the whole, it's almost like the genetic, what are they doing over the CRISPR? It's like everyone, and I get it, man. Like I do think we're lied to, for sure. And I think that there's a part of me that I love all these topics because I'm curious, right? But I think there are people who get really overboard with it. Because to me, it doesn't matter what really happened. But I do get fascinated if like I've been hoodwinked and there's something cool going on.
Definitely. But
I can't get crazy with it, you know? And I think people who try to cut out and say Rome wasn't real, there's this whole other like rabbit hole about the marble. Have you heard any of this?
I don't think I have.
Okay, so I have no idea. Like, again, by the way, I'd like to say to anyone who's listened for 2 hours to us ramble and talk about nothing, I love a conspiracy theory, but I don't believe, like, my need to believe anything is 0%. I feel 0 invested, and I love all of it. And so there is a conspiracy around some of the marble. Apparently there's like, you can find marble statues where they've been broken and it looks like living tissue and like bone segments. It's like something alchemical that we have no understanding of. That's the argument.
Gotcha. For some reason, my mind was immediately jumping towards like marble balls, and I was like, nope, that's definitely
no.
Yeah.
No, like, but what's your knee-jerk intuitive thought of that? Like bullshit or?
Okay, so
I wish I had the photo.
I'm going to give you my first thought, which is not intuitive on that, and then I'll give you the intuitive one after. For anyone who doesn't know, well, I'm sure that's everyone because I've never been on this show before.
No, go for it.
I was a professional sculptor for a while, and I also worked in film and TV as a set builder for foam carving and things like that. But I do have experience carving marble, and I think part of that conspiracy theory is coming from the idea that human beings aren't capable of creating that kind of work. But I know a lot of people who are, and I've seen them do it. So to me, it
Well,
almost,
no, they're not arguing. It's
yeah.
that like about the gift of, they're saying like, what is this broken stuff and why does it look like bone?
Oh no, absolutely. I know that. But what I'm saying though is I think one of the reasons why they are coming out and saying, oh, this is bone, oh, this used to be living creatures, is because a lot of people aren't really able to process some of the art that was done
Yeah.
in the right way. When it comes to that kind of artwork, that is tens of years to make those kind of things. I mean, I know people who have been working on marble sculptures for 30 plus years. It's insane, but it is a very real thing. On the intuitive side, when it comes to things like alchemical changes and thinking that most of the sculptures are changes in a living being to a marble sculpture, I'm iffy on that. There is some level of alchemy that I definitely believe in. I mean, alchemy was the building blocks for modern chemistry, for example.
I think it's still around. I just think we're not taught it.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely.
We're not
And
allowed to know
I
that.
think plenty of it works, but I think that one
Yeah.
might be a little bit reaching for that
I
specific
agree.
one. It's a fun conspiracy theory.
It's very fun
But
because it's scary. It's kind of creepy.
It makes me think of the monument mythos, not found footage, oh gosh, I completely lost the word for that. Monument mythos. It's all those YouTube shorts or YouTube videos where they make them out to be like realistic. We'll cut that part out of the podcast.
No, you're fine. No. It stays. I'm just kidding.
Oh God. What is it called? How do I not remember this?
What are you talking about? Like, give me the idea of what you're getting towards.
So, have you seen the Mandela catalog?
No.
Oh gosh. So there's a modern thing in horror that are YouTube short videos. Like probably another example that you might have heard of, because I think Rob Scallion's the one who made it, is the Greylock. Oh, what is it called? Gosh. Okay, I'm gonna look this up because it's gonna bother me so much.
Do it. But what were we on? What was the topic?
We were talking about the marbles, and I was comparing it to one of those called the Monument Mythos, which is kind of similar to that. It's actually funny how close it is to that. Basically, all of the Monument Mythos stories are different American, different American wonders are actually living beings that are evil and killing people. They feed people to Abraham Lincoln, things like that.
Oh, like the interesting,
Mm-hmm.
like the idols.
Yeah, it's actually very, very well done. But this conspiracy theory feels like they're pulling from a bunch of these just stories, basically, online, rather than actually, what is my laptop doing? Okay.
What do you think about? I'm getting tired. What are your thoughts about the like? How do you say like the giants and the mountains and the things?
I'd like to believe in it. I think that they probably existed in spirit. I'd like to get more solid proof to say that they existed in physical form.
Any capacity. Yeah. Do you think dragons ever existed in physical form or still do?
God, I hope so.
Yeah, me too. I hope so much. Oh my gosh. Satanists believe that they do.
Mm-hmm.
They claim to confer with them in the tunnels.
Oh gosh. Well, it's difficult too because all of these things, like we have a clear picture in our mind of what we think they are.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're kind of wrong with what we're picturing.
Mm-hmm.
They might exist, but they might be something totally different than what we think they are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, dragon might not be a giant scaly lizard. That might just be what we think it is. Terms and words are so fickle with that. It's difficult to fully embrace things.
Well, like when I say dragon, though, I mean like a sentient, knowing, flying reptile, right? Like that has an agenda that like can make you want gold and shit, like can influence what you're doing, what you're about.
Well, the other thing is,
even go ahead.
With the dragons, that is supposed to be a direct representation of Lucifer as well. and Satan.
It's also
Yeah.
supposed to be a direct representation of one of the Old Testament books about God, and it's weird. And I've read it
Yep.
where they under the you know what I'm talking about with the steam and the virgins and all this stuff, like everything about that, it would appear as though they're speaking about something not very human. And that's in the Bible. So what's that about? You know what I mean?
I mean, there are a lot of things in the Bible that it's just like, do we take this literally or is it meant to represent something? And I just don't know.
Then we can't though.
Yeah. I finally found the term I was looking for,
What
and
is it?
God, am I embarrassed. Analog horror.
No. What is it called?
Analog horror.
And what does that mean again?
It's basically it's become kind of oversaturated to the point where it's hard to give an exact definition, but it's basically YouTube horror shorts that are designed to be something that are like real. They are
Like stories.
kind of, people make like fake news reports, fake documents, all this other stuff. And it's just videos that are introducing a world outside of our own that are terrifying, basically.
And like off and
Yeah.
stuff. I love that stuff sometimes.
Yeah. It's pretty good. Some of it's really good, and others are really, really, really bad.
I would rather like read, hear horror than see it any day. So it's one of the only ways I can really consume it.
Oh, well, these aren't reading. This isn't to read it specifically.
But you like hear the story, right? Or is it animated?
I'll send you one of them, and you'll understand it more. Now the question is which one do you want to know about? Because some of them are really, really cool, but really dark.
I can probably handle them.
Okay.
Send the one you like. Just send me one that you like.
Okay.
I can probably handle it. But so I have a question about sort of like, do you think it's people have alleged, and I'm curious what you think because I haven't seen it. But did you watch Stranger Things?
Yeah, I'm probably in the minority on that one though, because I just did not like Stranger Things at all.
I don't know that I think I've seen like one episode, but it was towards the end, and I just didn't think the acting was very good. But I wasn't in the story like people have said.
Yeah.
But regardless of that, what's weird is that they're like these really kind of like, I don't want to be rude. I don't know how to say this. Dang it. Just people who are very, very isolated. You know what I mean? Very remote areas. And they kind of don't know what internet fame would be. I don't think. There just seems to be like a very real, like, why are we on this? Like, what is this about? Yeah, I'll tell you my story, but even I don't believe it type thing.
Yeah.
But some of them have been kind of saying the same thing over time, which is that something about that world or that experience and the way things seem to look was familiar to some of their dreamscapes.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
So I will say there's a big thing in Hollywood of people getting their ideas from drugs. That is not a slight on whether or not they did that. I think that there's a large number of drugs that actually allow you to see things that are there but you just can't see. That being,
and in some of these rural towns.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
There's a knowing there in Hollywood with a lot of those things. Having worked for it, there is definitely a group of people.
That's what I think.
Yeah, it's not a gigantic group of people like everyone thinks. It's not every single person in there.
No, but someone's saying, I've got a great idea. Make it look like this.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what that looks like. And then you're just like, oh, oopsie. No one else will know, but we know. And if you know, you know. That's what I think was true. And that's what I felt when I was watching those interviews, was I felt very strongly, just intuitively, that these people were being honest. They just had shared this experience somehow. And what's crazy is there was this guy, he was a doctor, he's already quit and basically disappeared, ran for the hills. He was the one doing the DMT drip experiments. I think it was in the UK or Cambridge for sure, but there was one maybe in the East Coast. And they were mapping this world. They were encountering the same entities. And we talked about on the podcast a little bit with Terry, and I was like, there's only going to be certain entities that are just interested multiple times to deal with us.
Yeah.
Like, we're probably very annoying.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
So we're probably not getting the creme de la creme of the energies. They're, you know,
Well,
and so
on the annoying
now
front,
you're mapping
yeah.
it.
On the annoying front, you see that on investigations all the time. There are tons and tons of places that are extremely active for like 3 or 4 years, and then they just stop. And it's not because, the spirit's gone away. It's because the spirit's like, I am so fucking done with these ghost hunters coming into our friggin' building. Yeah. I mean,
Really?
yep,
And you can still feel them around?
absolutely.
Dang.
And they
They're
might,
just playing possum?
yeah, they might make a mistake and like set off like an EMF or something, but then they just don't want to communicate because they're annoyed to hell that we keep going in there.
Dang, that's one way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, tangent. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. Dang. I don't know, man. It seems so strange to think that there's this other world. And I know that I have been propositioned in a dream because it just felt different. You just know it's different.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm such a belligerent person, and I don't think I even knew at the time how important it was what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
But I just started talking shit, and it was right before I started training with your mom.
Oh
And
gosh.
I think they were like, we got to get her before this happens.
Yeah, maybe so.
Because it was weird. It was like, oh, so far, never again. But
Well, on the note of drugs influencing how people see and perceive things, just a little fun fact: the Hellraiser series is said to have been literally designed off of a trip with Jimson weed, which is
I don't know. I've never watched it. Is it weird?
it's super weird. I wouldn't say
Do you
it's.
think it's accurate to anything?
I think some of the designs are accurate. I think what happened is the art director got the designs from that, and then they wrote a script on it, which,
Can only
scripts,
be so good,
yeah,
right?
yeah, pretty much.
Do you think that some of these drugs just attune us to a certain frequency? So, like, everybody who does DMT is attuned to that one realm. Everyone who gets crazy on heroin is probably attuned to the same energies that are. Or do you think it's kind of like a radio like that?
I think the chemicals cause us to perceive everything differently. I don't know if it's attuning us to specific energies, but I do think that different chemicals make it easier to see different energies.
Would that imply that there's one that would make us see the good ones better? Like, or
Yeah,
no?
I'm sure there are.
Mm.
I wouldn't
I
know
get
specifically, but I'm sure there are.
me either. Huh.
But yeah, no, anyone out there who is looking at trying Jimson weed, don't.
Really?
That shit is fucking terrifying. You hear all of these stories.
Dang. I've never even heard of that.
It's also called Devil's Trumpet.
Maybe I've heard of that. I found out the angel's trumpet is super deadly.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hallucinogen.
Yep. The one that I'm talking about is a type of nightshade.
Mm.
It's stupidly dangerous. But it is also called Datura.
Datura from life.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people, if anyone hears about it, will know exactly what I'm talking about. But
we were talking about the hemlocks today because we were telling the second part of the story of what happened up there when I was there last year.
mm-hmm.
But I was curious. Terry was talking about the stuff that she did to sort of like ingratiate herself with the energies that are in the hemlocks when she was like, hey, I'm going to be around because I'm going to be around Derek.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever have an experience like that where you were like, because you didn't grow up there?
No, I didn't grow up there. The first time I was down there, though, I did start just walking towards the hemlocks on my own. Because he was doing kind of like a little drive-by, showing everything. We got out of the car, and I just immediately booked it in that direction. And he actually ended up having to stop me because it was a little bit much. But
What was much?
He just said that I was starting to get close to the areas that they don't want people going towards.
Yeah.
But it felt like I just needed to go there, and I don't know why. But I did have some pretty weird experiences just on that property in general. I mean, I'm sure I told you about the bear thing that I saw.
Mm-mm.
So I was over at the lumber yard, which for the listeners is basically they have a bunch of properties, and if you continue down that road through the
Yeah,
properties,
I've been there.
yeah, there is a little outcrop where he cuts down trees for the winter, and he will chop up boards to sell them. Well, I went there one day by myself, just kind of chilling on a walk, and there was this big friggin' brown hairy thing up against one of the trees. Looked like a giant bear, and it basically growled more or less at me, more like a huff than a growl, really. And no, I backed away slowly and left, but I have no idea what that thing was. We saw footprints there.
I do
Yeah.
now. I think Terry might have told me. I remember she told me that while we were there.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot that. Yeah.
I thought it was a grizzly bear. According to him, there weren't grizzly bears in that part of the country.
Mm.
And he said, oh, maybe
Weird.
it's a phase change bear, but that thing was way bigger. And I was pretty close to it, too. It was 10 feet. There was no big distance issue at all. It was on all fours. It was about as tall as I
What's
was.
a theory? What's a weird theory?
A weird theory? Well, my Native American friends say bear spirit, but I don't know. I think it was, I don't know. I can't
Repping the
find it.
team.
Yeah, I can't describe it. It's one of the few things that I've
Yeah.
seen that I've just been like, I don't know what the hell that was. I'm assuming just
Have you encountered a skinwalker over there?
yeah, easily. That has happened more times than not over there.
What do they feel like to you? Like kind or not kind? We know they're not
No,
kind, but
not
like
kind.
just dismissive.
Angry in
Yeah.
a lot of cases. Angry that you're in their territory. And I mean, that's not the only place I've ever seen a skinwalker either. I have seen it at other
Right.
places too. The ones there just seem on guard all the time.
Is that because of what happened with the family, or is that predating that? Like what happened to them?
Well, you do know the story about how he lets some Native Americans practice on that land.
No.
You didn't hear about that? So he was friends with a local tribe, or I guess an offshoot of a tribe that had separated.
Oh yeah, he sold or gifted some land a lot
Yeah,
to them.
yeah, and he would let them come onto his part of the land as well to do different things.
Like
And
what?
I
Satanic?
no, it's difficult to. I'm not really going to call it satanic for Native Americans. They were doing dark stuff. I know they were, but it just made the land weird. And I don't know how to describe it other than that. It's just strange over there. Like, yeah, it's super negative, and all the backstory of what that guy did there is awful, but even without that, it would
Would
just be
anybody
strange.
who had been there descend in that way, essentially,
I
because
don't
of the
think
land?
that's the case because Derek hasn't yet.
True. Yeah, thank God.
But
But he's also got to deal with them.
yeah, he does. But I think that it definitely didn't help. It made it easier to do that. But if you want my honest opinion, I think he made a deal with something, not Derek, but my grandfather. I think he made a
Mm-hmm.
deal with something that drove him to do a lot of those things.
Mm-hmm.
I never met the guy, though. I'm
Yeah.
completely just speaking on conjecture and what I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
But no, that land is weird. Have you discussed the bridge incident on the thing yet?
With you?
With anyone on the podcast?
No. I mean, about you
Yeah, the one where we all went to that
in
bridge.
LA?
And,
No, we haven't. I don't think we have.
okay, so I'm not going to give exact locations for this, but there's a specific bridge in Los Angeles that is coined a suicide bridge. There is another bridge that is right next to it that has had no suicides on it. Exact same situation, exact same design, exact same height off the ground, but for some reason it's only been this one bridge, and there's been hundreds of them ever since it's been built. Well, this was when I was doing some solo investigating and with one other friend occasionally. I'd go there and I'd use it for kind of training almost. The basic stuff that we heard when I was there by myself was babies crying, loud voices. When I went with someone else, someone felt like they got groped and just weird stuff. Well, it was never anything that was bad enough for me to be like, okay, I don't want to come here. It was definitely something very dark. But the last time I went there with my mother, when they were coming down to visit me, we were walking down that bridge path, and everyone felt a little bit off. It wasn't too bad for me, but Brian and my mother were very, very much uncomfortable with being down there. And as we were walking back up, there was this figure that all of us saw completely differently. I saw it as a guy holding a phone in a gray hoodie, and my mother saw a black shirt. Brian saw some weird pattern thing. I can't remember exactly. But it just followed us up that little trail to get back up out of the ravine from that bridge. And we were booking it up that ravine, and it was walking at basically what I would call snail's pace, but it was keeping up with us the whole way. And we finally got out of that ravine area and went across the street, and we see this guy go up, right up to the edge of the street and just friggin' disappear. But that place, there's so many stories about investigations there. I would never recommend someone go there. But the one person that I used to go with occasionally,
Do you ever wish that you hadn't?
it's iffy. Yes and no. I think it was a good learning opportunity because it was what you don't want to deal with at that location. Kind of where I need to step away and be like, nope, I'm done with this. But also, there was just something about that place. The person I went with and I both got almost obsessed with that location. Like to the
Yeah.
point where we would message each other back and be like, are we going to the bridge today? Are we going to go to the bridge? It got really weird. And
That's what it does.
also on top of that, every time we tried to leave, I mean, we'd use the GPS to leave just because the area is kind of weird in
Dude,
general.
this is my nightmare, what you're about to
Yeah.
say.
The GPS would freaking just buzz out. It would either navigate us right back to it, like it would get us like a mile away and then put us in a circle and put us right back at it, or it would give us nonsensical directions. Or even one time, the freaking GPS voice changed to another voice, and it was just weird.
Mm.
The person that I went with at one point also had a full-on blackout. Like they were cognizant of being there in the moment, but then when we left, they couldn't remember a damn thing that had happened. It was just weird. That was probably the only place I've ever been to for investigation that I can say I will never go back. But that place is just strange.
Stronghold somehow. It's old. Yeah, man. I definitely think it's one of those things too where you're just like, the world is so much more strange than people want to admit.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is okay.
Absolutely.
But like, I'm willing to be honest about what I think is possible.
Mm.
I don't know about if half of it's as true as, but stand on business on most of it.
Yeah, well.
But it has been a wonderful chat, and I've
definitely
enjoyed this so much, and this will be one of very many more.
Okay, sounds good.
But we'll chat soon, and I'm going to stop this, but don't leave the chat, okay?
Bye.
All right. Till next time. Oh God. My remote isn't working. Dude, I hate technology.